Have you ever noticed how some people change the moment you start putting your foot down? When you begin saying no, speaking your truth, or simply choosing peace over pleasing? Maybe it's a friend who used to call every day, but now goes silent after you set a boundary. Or maybe it's a family member who once praised you, but now talks around you, not to you. It's confusing, isn't it? One day everything seems fine, and the next, something just feels off. But here's something I want you to remember. It's not always about what you did. Sometimes it's simply because you stopped being easy to control. Now, I know for many of us, especially as we get older, we begin to reevaluate things. We value our time more. We don't have the energy or the desire to keep bending ourselves out of shape for the comfort of others. And when you begin to live from that place of self-respect, it changes the way people see you. Some will admire your strength, others, not so much. And when they can't guide your decisions like they used to, they won't always walk away. Some will try something else. That's what we're talking about today. When people realize they can't control you anymore, they often turn to subtle psychological tactics, ways of pulling at your heart, your emotions, your sense of guilt, just to get you back under their thumb. It's not always loud or obvious. It can be quiet, even polite on the surface. But make no mistake, it's manipulation. And if you're not paying attention, you might start second-guessing yourself, thinking you're the problem, when in fact, you're just waking up to your power. Let me give you an example. Imagine you've spent years always showing up for family dinners, even when you're tired, even when it didn't suit your schedule. Then one day, you decide, you know what? I need to rest tonight. You politely decline. What do you get in return? Not understanding. Not appreciation for your honesty. Instead, you hear something like, well, I guess some people don't care about family anymore. Just like that, a simple boundary turns into a guilt trip. And suddenly, you find yourself questioning, am I being selfish? Should I just go anyway? That's not love speaking. That's control wearing the mask of concern. What's happening here is subtle emotional leverage. They're trying to shift how you feel, not because you've done something wrong, but because they don't like losing influence over your choices. And the moment you react, apologize, defend yourself, or give in, you hand that influence right back. This is where true wisdom becomes so powerful. You see, it isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's not about shutting people out or pretending not to care. It's about knowing what you can control, your thoughts, your reactions, your inner peace, and letting go of what you can't, the opinions, judgments, or expectations of others. It's about standing firm, not because you want to push people away, but because you finally understand that peace of mind isn't something you owe to anyone else. When someone tries to guilt you into saying yes to something you know isn't right for you, you don't need to argue. You don't need to explain yourself over and over. You can simply say, I appreciate your concern, but I've made my choice. That calmness, that clarity, that's what breaks the pattern. People who want to control you don't know what to do with someone who doesn't flinch. And here's something else to be aware of. When emotional manipulation doesn't work, some people take a different path. They start talking. Not to you, but about you. They twist your words. They plant seeds of doubt in others. It could be small things at first, a quiet comment like, lately she's been distant, or he's changed. But over time, those seeds grow. Suddenly people are pulling away, treating you differently, and you don't even know why. It's heartbreaking, especially when you've done nothing but honor your needs. And it can be tempting to jump into defense mode, call everyone up, explain yourself, clear the air. But here's the truth. The more you try to correct every misunderstanding, the deeper into their game you fall. Because once you're chasing people's approval, once you're trying to manage their perception of you, you've already given them the power. I want to share a little piece of timeless wisdom. Someone once said, if you are unaffected by what is said, you have already won. Isn't that beautiful? If someone lies about you and you remain calm, you've already risen above the noise. Not because it doesn't hurt, not because you don't care, but because you've chosen to protect your peace over chasing every whisper. Your life, your actions, your calm presence, that's what speaks loudest. When others see that the rumor doesn't match the reality, they begin to see the truth. And the ones who continue to believe lies? Well, maybe they were never meant to be in your corner to begin with. That's a hard truth to swallow, I know. Especially when it comes from people we love. But sometimes the lesson isn't about who stayed. It's about who respected your growth. You see, there's a kind of quiet dignity that comes from knowing yourself. When you stop trying to prove your worth, when you stop shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone, you start attracting peace. The kind of peace that doesn't rely on whether others clap for you or criticize you. The kind of peace that comes from within. So if you've ever been made to feel wrong for honoring your boundaries, if you've been talked about behind your back just because you finally said enough, please hear this. You are not the problem. You are the evidence that freedom is possible. You are the reminder that not everyone can be pushed around. And some people, well, they just don't know how to handle that. Now take a breath with me. Let that truth sink in. You've come this far in life by learning, adjusting, and growing through every season. You've earned the right to decide what matters, to protect your peace, and to walk away from anything that feels like a cage. That's not selfish. That's wise. Let's keep going. There's more to uncover. More of those hidden tactics people use when they feel their control slipping. And understanding them, that's how you stay one step ahead, grounded, steady, and completely free. So now that we've taken a closer look at how guilt and gossip can be used to pull you back into someone else's control, let's talk about something even more subtle, but just as powerful. When someone plays the victim. You might not notice it right away. In fact, it can catch you completely off guard. One moment, you're simply asserting yourself. Maybe declining an invite, making a personal choice, or standing firm on something that matters to you. And suddenly, you're the bad guy. You're made to feel like you've hurt someone, even though you were simply being honest or setting a healthy boundary. They might say things like, "I just don't know what I did to deserve this," or, "After all I've done for you." It's carefully worded, just vague enough to shift the blame without directly accusing you. And what happens next is very human. You start to question yourself. You replay conversations in your head. You wonder if maybe you were too harsh. But here's what's really happening. They're flipping the script to avoid taking responsibility. Now that doesn't mean everyone who feels hurt is manipulative. Of course not. Real hurt can and does happen in any relationship. But there's a difference between someone sharing their feelings and someone using their hurt to make you feel guilty, to steer your behavior, or to keep you under emotional control. That's not communication. That's control with a sad face. Let me share a story that might feel familiar. Emily, a woman in her 60s, had been part of the same friend group for over 20 years. They did everything together, birthdays, holidays, even vacations. But over time, Emily began to feel like she was always the one giving, her time, her energy, her space. She started to feel drained. So she did something simple but brave. She started to pull back a little. She stopped answering every call right away. She began to say no when she needed rest. She wasn't rude, just clear. And that's when things shifted. Suddenly, one friend started telling others that Emily was pulling away, that she was acting different. Emily hadn't done anything cruel. But because she had chosen herself for once, someone else decided to become the victim and painted Emily as the villain. What did Emily do? At first, she wanted to explain herself, to fix it, to prove she wasn't the bad one. But then she remembered something. Just because someone feels hurt doesn't mean you caused harm. And just because they're loud with their pain doesn't mean they're right. So, she took a breath. She stayed kind. She stayed quiet. She focused on the friends who still treated her with respect and let the rest go. It's not always easy to walk away from a false narrative, especially when you're someone who values connection, loyalty, and kindness. But here's where clear thinking really helps. You're not responsible for how others twist your choices. You're only responsible for living with integrity. That means holding your head high even when others try to pull you low. Because truth has a funny way of revealing itself. Sooner or later, people start to see through the performance. And the ones who matter, the ones who genuinely care, will come back, often quietly, often with respect. Now let's talk about something even more dangerous than emotional guilt or playing the victim. It's when someone tries to cut you off from your support. Not with an argument, not with anger, but with whispers, with subtle comments, with quiet manipulation designed to isolate you. It might start with a small remark, "You know, I'm not sure you can trust so-and-so anymore." Or, "I don't think they really understand you like I do." At first it feels like concern, but slowly it becomes something more. You begin to feel a distance from the people you used to lean on. Conversations become awkward. Calls go unanswered. And you're left wondering what changed. But the truth is, it wasn't you. It was someone else behind the scenes, pulling strings, trying to shrink your circle so they could become your only voice. Because here's the secret about control. It works best in isolation. As long as you're surrounded by people who see you clearly, who reflect your strength, your values, your goodness, it's hard for anyone to bend your sense of self. So those who want to control you, they try to remove those mirrors. Not by dragging you away, but by gently convincing you that no one else gets you, that only they have your back. And once you're isolated, you become easier to influence. It's like walking through a fog without a map. You start to question your own compass. But don't let them steal your clarity. Don't let someone else's fear of your independence make you doubt your inner truth. Because real friends don't fade when you set boundaries. Real relationships don't crumble at the first sign of space. And people who truly care, they ask. They check in. They clarify. They don't assume the worst. They don't whisper in shadows. A wise thinker once wrote that we should spend time only with those who uplift us, who make us better, not smaller. That's not just wise advice. That's survival. Especially in a world that often tells us, especially as we age, to keep the peace at all costs. But peace that costs your self-respect? That's not peace. That's silence with a price tag. You have every right to walk with people who walk with you. Not behind you, not above you, but beside you. And if someone is pulling you away from those people just to feel more powerful, that's not love. That's strategy. And speaking of strategy, let's explore another one people use when they can't guide your actions directly. They don't yell. They don't scold. They just plant seeds of doubt. Not enough to start an argument, just enough to make you wonder. Are you sure you want to do that? That's a bold move at your age. Just looking out for you, that's all. It sounds harmless, even caring, but it's like a dripping faucet. Slowly, steadily, those comments erode your confidence, until one day, you're no longer acting from trust. You're acting from fear. Fear of making the wrong move. Fear of disappointing someone. Fear that maybe, just maybe, you don't know what you're doing after all. And that's where control creeps back in. Not through dominance, but through doubt. Real confidence doesn't come from applause. It comes from knowing why you do what you do. It comes from reflection, from reason, from lived experience. You've lived decades. You've survived, grown, adapted. You don't need someone's hesitation to keep you safe. You need your own voice to stay strong. So the next time someone questions your path, don't argue. Don't defend. Just smile, thank them, and continue walking. Not because you're stubborn, but because you've thought it through, because you've earned your decisions, because your life is yours, not a committee vote. It's easy to forget how strong you are when others keep poking holes in your certainty. But let me remind you, your strength isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It shows up in how you carry yourself, in how you keep going even when others doubt, in how you choose stillness over drama, clarity over confusion. You are not too old to trust your gut. You are not too much for those who respect you. And you are certainly not alone in this. Let's keep going. There are still more signs to watch for, more patterns that reveal when someone isn't looking out for you, but looking to keep you under control. The more we understand these patterns, the easier it becomes to break them. There's something quietly powerful about someone who knows who they are, who no longer needs to explain, convince, or prove. And when that kind of calm confidence shows up, it unsettles people who are used to calling the shots. That's when they often reach for another tactic, emotional provocation. It's not always obvious. In fact, it's rarely about what's being said. It's how it's said. They bring up old stories in the middle of unrelated conversations. They joke about something you're sensitive about, then follow it with, "I was just kidding." Or they interrupt just enough to throw you off track, acting surprised when you react. And that's the point. They want you to react. Not calmly, not reasonably, but emotionally. Because if they can get you to snap, to raise your voice, to lose your cool even for a moment, suddenly they become the calm one, the rational one. And you're labeled as the unstable one. But here's the trick. It's not about the words. They're baiting your emotions. This is manipulation in its purest form. And it often happens in places where you least expect it. At the dinner table, in a meeting, in a quiet moment at home. It's calculated and it's designed to make you look like the problem. Jason, a man I once met at a community center, told me about his experience with a coworker who did this constantly. The coworker would subtly undermine him in meetings, never openly hostile, just sarcastic enough to stir frustration. One day, Jason finally lost his temper. He interrupted, raised his voice, and walked out of the room. Guess what happened next? The coworker calmly said to everyone, "See? That's what I was talking about. He's difficult to work with." Jason told me he regretted that moment, not because he was wrong to feel upset, but because he realized afterward that he gave the other person exactly what they wanted, a reaction. That's why self-control matters so much. Someone once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In other words, if someone's goal is to pull you into their storm, your power lies in staying centered. You don't need to match their energy. You don't need to stoop to their level. You pause. You breathe. You stay grounded. And in that stillness, their strategy falls apart. Because a person looking for drama doesn't know what to do with someone who won't take the bait. Now let's talk about something that might seem flattering at first, until it's not. Imitation. You decide to try something new, maybe take up painting, or volunteer for a project, and soon after, someone close to you suddenly develops the same interest. They copy how you speak, how you dress, how you move through the world. At first, it feels like admiration. But over time, it starts to feel strange. Like they're not just inspired by you, they're trying to be you. Here's what's really going on. For some people, watching you grow, change, and move forward makes them feel like they're falling behind. And instead of doing the inner work to discover their own path, they try to follow yours, step for step. But it's hollow, because they're not building something of their own. They're chasing a version of you they can never truly reach. Why? Because what they're copying is only what they can see on the outside. They don't see the quiet work you've done, the late-night thinking, the mistakes you learned from, the personal history that shaped every decision. And no matter how closely they follow, they're always a few steps behind, because they're reacting, not creating. A wise person once said it clearly. True character is not about imitation. It's about identity. You weren't meant to live someone else's life, and no one else can live yours. So when someone starts copying you too closely, you don't need to get angry. You don't need to call them out. You just keep moving forward. You take a turn they don't expect. You evolve again, and they stall. Because imitation can only follow. It can never lead. Let them watch. Let them mimic. Eventually, the difference between real and rehearsed becomes clear to everyone. And that brings us to the last, and perhaps most hurtful tactic of all, the silent hope that you fail. It's hard to admit this one, but if you've lived long enough, you've probably felt it. That moment when someone smiles at your news, says the right words, but you can feel something's off. There's no warmth behind the encouragement, no true excitement in their voice. Because deep down, they're not rooting for you. They're waiting for you to fall so they can feel better about standing still. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's just insecurity wearing a polite face. Your growth, your goals, these things remind them of what they're not doing. And instead of rising with you, they secretly hope you'll stumble. That way they can say, "See, I knew it. It was too much, too risky, too late." But here's what true wisdom teaches us. You are not here to carry the weight of someone else's fear. You are not here to downplay your dreams to make others feel comfortable. And you certainly aren't here to prove your worth by failing slowly to keep someone else company. You are here to live fully, to rise, not because others believe in you, but because you do. And yes, there will be times when things don't go as planned. Projects will fall through. Ideas won't always work. But that's not failure. That's life. The only real failure is letting other people's quiet doubt hold you back from trying in the first place. You don't owe anyone your struggle just to keep them from feeling left behind. You don't owe them explanations, justifications, or your silence. What you owe yourself is honesty, courage, momentum. So if you've noticed people pulling away the more you grow, if you felt unsupported in moments when you expected celebration, please know it's not a reflection of your path. It's a reflection of theirs. Your strength will sometimes offend people who haven't found their own. That's not your burden to carry. We're reminded that real success isn't about applause. It's about consistency, character, the quiet decision, day after day, to stay true to yourself no matter who's watching or waiting. So breathe deeply, stand tall, trust yourself. You've come too far to hand over your peace now. Let your calm be your answer. Let your life speak louder than their noise. And remember, when people can't control you, they'll try everything else. But those tactics only work if you let them. When you stop reacting, when you choose your responses with clarity and intention, their grip fades. Their whispers lose power. And what's left is you, strong, steady, and free. If any part of this spoke to you, I invite you to share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if you know someone who needs this reminder, someone who's walking this same path, send this video their way. If you haven't already, tap that like button and hit subscribe so we can keep walking through this journey together. You are not alone. And every step you take toward inner peace and self-mastery is a step toward the life you were always meant to live. Here's to living fully, choosing peace, and standing strong at every age and on your own terms.